Hey guys. Tonight we drift straight into the strange, flickering, candle-lit world of the Middle Ages, a place where a single odd glance, a quiet habit, or even the way you scratched your nose could get you labeled mad. You step into it now, feeling the damp chill of stone floors under your feet and hearing the faint murmur of people who definitely aren't minding their own business. Everything feels just a little too close, a little too suspicious. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're already thinking, yeah, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and the local time. Right now, I love seeing how far this little cozy corner of the internet reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move down a narrow village lane, the kind where there's no such thing as privacy, and every habit you have is basically community property. Your neighbors observe you like unpaid security cameras with strong opinions. The medieval world doesn't run on data, but it runs very heavily on vibes, rumors, and whatever Gladys from 3 huts over thinks she saw you do at dawn. And so, in a place where explanations are few and superstitions are many, it only takes a single off moment for someone to whisper that word: madness. They don't say it lightly. Madness is not a quirky personality trait here. Madness is divine punishment, demonic interference, or the humors inside your body staging a rebellion. You reach a market square, lit by torches that sputter like they're tired of being torches. People shuffle around, wrapped in wool, half of them looking exhausted because sleep hygiene isn't invented yet, and pillows are stuffed with hay that has opinions about poking you. A woman glances at you for a moment too long, and you realize you're being evaluated. Not for fashion, no one here is winning best dressed unless damp tunic couture becomes a thing, but for normalcy. In the Middle Ages, normal is safety. Normal means your neighbors don't stare at you like you're a walking omen. You try to blend in, adjusting your expression to something neutral, but this is where the first whispers of oddness begin. Because the truth is, even the tiniest deviation from the expected routine could make people start speculating about what's wrong with your mind. There's a mainstream historical fact about this. Medieval communities often acted as informal surveillance networks, watching for signs of madness long before scholars wrote about mental illness. People believed that madness left visible clues on your face, your posture, your habits, even the way you breathed. And then there's the fringe-level detail that medieval treatises sometimes suggested watching: how someone reacted to cheese. Yes, cheese as a diagnostic tool. If you refused it, or craved too much of it, someone might raise an eyebrow. It's unclear whether this was real medical wisdom or just someone trying to justify their dairy agenda, but it absolutely existed in the margins. Historians still argue whether this kind of food-based observation was common practice or just the medieval version of that one weird tip doctors hate. You pause at a well, listening to the splashing echo as someone draws water. Across the square, 2 men lean together and whisper, giving you a look that suggests they might already be categorizing you into one of their mental checklists. Did you walk too fast? Too slow? Look too thoughtful? Look not thoughtful enough? Existence here feels like a performance you didn't audition for. A simple thing like pausing to watch a bird hopping around in the mud might be interpreted as a sign you're hearing invisible voices. People in the village have seen those same behaviors in others before. The wanderer who muttered to himself, the herbalist who stared at the sky too long, the shepherd who laughed alone at dusk. Folks don't forget patterns like that, even if the patterns only make sense inside a stew of superstition and fear. One man bumps into you and doesn't apologize, nobody here does, but he watches your reaction like it's a theological exam. If you respond too calmly, you might be hiding something. If you respond too harshly, you might be unstable. Honestly, it feels like being evaluated by medieval Yelp reviewers. You feel the itch to crack a joke, just to break the tension. But humor itself is tricky here. Laugh too much, and you're suspicious. Laugh too little, and you're gloomy. Laugh at the wrong moment and you are a walking red flag. You keep walking, pulling your cloak tighter around yourself, thinking about how wild it is that people once believed madness could spread the way cold rumors do. To them, madness wasn't solitary, it was contagious. Not through germs, but through proximity and influence, like an emotional draft. If someone in your household behaved oddly, neighbors expected the whole family to slip into some cosmic imbalance eventually. Imagine living in a world where your cousin's weirdness affected your social credit score. At the edge of the square, you see an old timber-framed house leaning slightly, like it's trying to eavesdrop. A rooster struts past you with the confidence of a landlord, and you realize some things never change. But even animals will watch for signs. People believed that mad individuals spooked livestock in specific ways. A cow avoiding you? That could be your reputation, unraveling faster than you can say, "It's just a cow, guys." Historians still argue whether this belief came from real observations or just the tendency of medieval cows to be dramatic. You take one more step into the deepening night, noticing how the torches flare like suspicious eyes. These whispers of oddness aren't abstract, they're the social glue and the social threat at the same time. Here, you don't get the luxury of eccentricity. Every action you take nudges you closer to safety or to scrutiny, and as your steps echo across the square, blending with the soft clatter of wooden soles around you, you can feel how fragile your place in this watchful world truly is. You drift onward through the dim square, and as you slip between two narrow cottages, you notice something almost comforting in the quiet, until you realize that in the medieval world, quiet isn't comforting at all. It's suspicious. You don't get 2 steps before someone glances your way, head tilted, as if measuring the weight of your silence. And this is where you begin to understand the strange logic of this place. Being too quiet is a problem. Too much silence is practically a billboard that says, "Hey everyone, something's wrong with me." You walk with your shoulders tucked slightly in, the cold air smoothing itself along your cheeks. But in this world, that silence you carry like a blanket can turn into a red flag faster than you can blink. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind here: the medieval idea that inner demons, melancholy vapors, or misaligned humors could literally seal someone's speech. People believed that evil forces, or even an overload of black bile, made a person retreat into unnatural quietness. Silence wasn't interpreted as peaceful. It was interpreted as, this person might be spiritually compromised. And by spiritually compromised, they basically meant, keep an eye on them. They might snap. Imagine introverts trying to survive here. It's like the world's worst personality test, where low-volume people get automatically marked as dangerous. You pass an old man sitting on a wooden stool by his doorway. He's sharpening a small knife, not for any dramatic reason, just because there's always something in this era that needs cutting, carving, trimming, or whittling. He watches you with narrowed eyes. And for a second, you're convinced he's about to accuse you of harboring demonic stillness. But instead, he just scratches his beard and spits on the ground. Apparently you've passed the not-too-quiet threshold by existing loudly enough. A woman carrying a basket full of turnips moves past you, humming a slightly off-key tune. She notices your lack of conversation and nudges her friend beside her. You catch the murmur. He keeps to himself, with that tone people use when they're 2 steps away from diagnosing you with something cosmic. Your footsteps echo between the walls, and you can't help but feel that your silence is somehow growing heavier. You want to say something out loud, anything to break it. Maybe comment on the weather, though that would be pointless because everyone here knows the weather intimately. It's always either too cold, too damp, or aggressively both. But here's the tricky part. If you talk to break the silence, you have to hit the perfect amount of sound. Too much silence is suspicious. Too much talking is also suspicious. Honestly, medieval social life feels like trying to crack an impossible code, except the code is held by people who haven't bathed since the last solar eclipse and who judge you while chewing leeks. You try a small, casual evening to a passerby. They blink at you, confused first because they didn't expect you to speak, and second because greetings aren't really a thing here unless it's a feast day or you owe them money. The person nods awkwardly and moves on, probably reassured now that you're not secretly battling demons. And then comes the fringe tidbit, the one few people expect. Some medieval writings claimed that demons used silence to nest inside individuals. Yes, nest, like birds. The idea was that if you stayed too quiet, you gave the spirits room to settle, fluff their ghostly feathers, maybe redecorate your soul a little. It's honestly one chicken metaphor away from being a children's story, but it was taken seriously enough to get people into trouble. Historians still argue whether this belief was genuinely widespread or mostly confined to theological texts written by monks who had too much time and not enough social life. You push onward, feeling that strange pressure of having to perform normalcy. A dog barks behind you, and you startle just a bit. Another silent strike against you, you're jumpy. People here watch reactions the way modern people watch plot twists. They want to decode meaning in everything, especially when silence wraps around you like an omen. Ahead, you see a small group gathered near a brazier, glowing with orange coals. Heat licks upward in shimmering waves, and you drift closer to warm your hands. But just as you do, the group falls unusually quiet, eyes shifting toward, for you. You realize that the sudden change in their chatter might not be about you at all. They might simply be retelling some dramatic village rumor. But the timing makes you look like something worth whispering about. One man scratches his chin and murmurs something about quiet minds being troubled, which is a polite medieval way of saying, "Watch that one." You consider breaking the tension with a joke, maybe something like, "Don't worry, I'm quiet, but I'm not demon bird quiet." But humor here requires precision, and you're not sure they'd appreciate the nuance. A child stares up at you with curious eyes. Kids don't care about social codes. They just want to know if you're going to do something interesting, like juggle or fall in mud. Your silence fascinates him. He pokes your cloak and asks, "Why don't you talk?" You shrug and say, "Just thinking." His eyes widen like you've confessed to a crime. Thinking too deeply is basically step one toward social suspicion here. People expect you to think minimally and plow maximally. As you move again through the flickering patches of torchlight, you realize how delicate medieval social rules are, how much pressure there is to behave just right. Silence is almost never neutral. It's an absence people feel responsible for filling with explanations, especially dramatic ones involving spirits, imbalanced humors, or curses your great-aunt might have picked up from a wandering merchant. You breathe out slowly, puffing mist into the air. Your own breath looks like it's trying to escape before things get weird. And honestly, you don't blame it. You leave behind the uneasy hush of the village lane, and almost immediately the atmosphere shifts. As if to compensate for your earlier quietness, the world around you erupts into chatter voices ricocheting through the cold air, bouncing off timber beams and thatched roofs. But here's the twist. In the medieval world, too much talking is just as suspicious as too little. You can practically hear the cosmic referee blowing a whistle every time someone's mouth runs longer than it should. So now you walk straight into the opposite problem: excessive talking panic. It starts with a young man leaning against a cart, spilling words into the air like he's worried they'll expire by morning. He's rambling at a friend about everything from weather omens to the village baker's new romantic disaster. And the friend is listening with an expression that says, "I'm only here because leaving would be a scene." The longer the talker goes on, the more you see people glancing over not with admiration, but with that slow, uneasy shift that says, "Is he all right?" See, the medieval community believed that non-stop chatter wasn't just annoying, it was unstable, spiritually risky, and possibly contagious. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval physicians often tied excessive talking to an excess of yellow bile, the humor associated with heat, agitation, and impulsive behavior. In other words, if you talk too much, they thought your insides were basically boiling over, steaming your brain like an unfortunate vegetable. And while today someone who talks constantly might just be nervous or overly caffeinated, here in this village, they imagine you cooking alive from emotional turbulence. You continue walking, feeling a strange pressure building around you. After all, you were just in trouble for being too quiet. Now you're surrounded by a world ready to pounce if you dare talk too much. It's like surviving a party where the acceptable behavior line is so thin, it's practically a thread, one wrong move and you're the main attraction at the rumor mill. Ahead of you, a woman with a laundry basket is talking at a speed that should defy the physics of human breath. You're impressed, honestly. But the way several neighbors eye her isn't impressed at all. It's concerned. One of them mutters, something about the tongue running freer than the mind. And you can tell he thinks she's one monologue away from summoning spirits. Another whispers that her husband must be suffering at home, which seems harsh but also extremely on-brand for medieval gossip culture. You slip by, and just then, the woman notices you. She pivots, words firing toward you like arrows. She asks where you're from, what you're doing, why your cloak looks newer than most, what your favorite saints are, and whether the weather is better wherever you walked last. You blink, overwhelmed, and try to answer politely. She blinks back faster, already onto the next topic. People nearby stare. Someone crosses themselves. You can practically feel the tension rise like freshly baked bread. A fringe tidbit pushes its way into your memory. Some medieval texts claimed that demons could loosen a person's tongue, making them babble uncontrollably. Not whispering, not sharing secrets, full-on babbling. Supposedly, the demon would sit on your chest or cling to your throat like a clingy cat, forcing your mouth to keep spilling words until the demon grew bored. Historians still argue whether this was widely believed among common folk, or mostly something theologians used to explain overly enthusiastic sermon givers. But either way, in a world like this, constant chatter wasn't taken lightly. You give the woman a polite half-smile and ease yourself away, but the crowd's eyes follow. They're not sure whether you started her talking, whether she infected you with talkiness, or whether both of you are on the express train to spiritual trouble. And honestly, none of those interpretations are flattering. You walk toward the center of the square where the noise grows louder. A group of men huddle around a wooden table, and one of them, the self-appointed storyteller of the group, is mid-rant. He's waving his arms like a windmill, trying out for a stage role. His voice carries across the space, dramatic, booming, and somehow 2 octaves higher than it should be for a man his size. The others look half entertained, half horrified. One man leans toward another and whispers just loud enough for you to overhear, "He's talking like this again. The humors are off." The other nods solemnly, as if diagnosing someone with an overly chatty disposition requires the gravitas of a funeral. They watch the speaker not with admiration but with dread, waiting, perhaps, for him to ascend into a frenzy. You catch yourself worrying too. Not because the man seems unstable, but because the longer he speaks, the more the village collectively tenses, like they expect lightning to strike or a goat to faint. Someone eventually tries to interrupt him, placing a hand on his shoulder with exaggerated gentleness. It's the medieval equivalent of, "Hey buddy, let's wrap it up." But he barrels on, and you see actual fear bloom on a few faces. It hits you then excessive talking isn't just a personal quirk here. It's thought to be a symptom of spiritual imbalance, a sign that the soul is overheating. The belief doesn't even have to make sense. If enough people think something is dangerous, it becomes dangerous socially, and in medieval societies, that's often all it took. A woman beside you murmurs, "Tongue too loose, mind too loose," which makes you instinctively keep your mouth shut for the next several minutes. Safer to be mistaken for quiet than for chaotic. But then again, remember last section? Quiet gets you in trouble too. So here you are again, walking the very fine line of medieval acceptability, cursed to navigate a world where even your speaking habits get judged harder than a courtroom oath. As you drift away from the chattering crowds, the noise fades like a tide receding, and you feel the air calm around you. But you know it won't last. In this world, you'll always be watched your silence, your speech, your everything, weighed like grain on a merchant's scale. And right now, you're barely breaking even. You move farther from the noisy pockets of the village, slipping into a quieter stretch of uneven road where shadows stretch long and thin across the path. You're grateful for the stillness. But as the night grows deeper, something strange happens. You find your eyes drifting upward toward the patchy strips of sky between the rooftops. Maybe it's the way the stars tremble gently, like tiny lanterns swinging from invisible beams. Or maybe it's just your mind trying to recalibrate after the sensory overload of the market. Either way, you pause, letting your gaze unfocus as you stare into the dark blue. Nothing above. And the moment you do, you feel it. That prickling behind you. That slow turn of someone's head. That breath of suspicion settling like dew. Because in the medieval world, staring into nothing, just letting your mind wander, is basically the equivalent of waving a flag that says, "Hello, I might be communing with entities you can't see." You don't need to say a word. Your silence plus that vacant gaze equals automatic trouble. Your eyes drift across the rooftops again, but this time you can sense villagers watching from windows and doorways. They see your stillness, your faraway look, and they don't interpret it as peaceful contemplation. They interpret it as the beginning of a spiritual malfunction. To them, a person who looks too long at nothing might be seeing something unholy, something invisible, something dangerous. A mainstream historical fact floats into your thoughts. Many medieval thinkers believed that the eyes reflected the state of the soul, not in a poetic sense, in a literal, diagnostic way. If someone gazed upward or outward for too long, it was suspected that the inner spirits, humors, or even demons were pulling their attention away from earthly reality. Vacant staring was listed in several treatises as an early symptom of madness. It's wild to think that zoning out something modern people do at least 14 times before breakfast was once treated like a divine alarm bell. But here comes the quirky flavor. Certain folk beliefs held that staring off into empty space allowed wandering spirits to slip into your field of vision. The idea was that demons approached from angles humans didn't normally look. So if you were staring into the middle distance, you might be inviting them. One charm even recommended waving hands rapidly in front of someone's face to interrupt the sightline, like medieval jazz hands meant to break a curse. Historians still argue whether this was common village practice or just the invention of one extremely dramatic monk. You blink and lower your gaze, but the damage may already be done. A small cluster of villagers stands near a doorway, two women, an older man, and a boy whose expression is equal parts curious and spooked. They're whispering. You catch fragments. Did you see how long? Just staring upward. Visions. Maybe. The saints preserve us. You clear your throat softly and try to give them a normal, grounded expression, which is probably the exact opposite of what they expect. But in medieval communities, once suspicion starts growing, it's like mold, it spreads quickly and thrives in damp conditions. Unfortunately for you, everything here is damp. You start walking again, making sure your stare remains focused and earthly. But you can feel that the road has shifted under your social feet. Now, every tiny glance is weighed differently. A cat darts out from behind a barrel, and you accidentally follow its movement with your eyes a bit too long. A man nearby stiffens immediately. He squints at you. You can almost feel him forming an internal report. Unusual eye focus, possible omen sensitivity. You keep walking. Faster. Ahead, near the wooden trough where horses usually drink, a man is repairing a cartwheel. As you pass, he looks you up and down and then holds your gaze. For 1 second too long, like he's searching your eyes for reflections of the supernatural. People here believe that madness in the mind casts shadows in the eyes. They also think demons show up as flickers or glints, so now you're worrying about whether your eyes are too shiny, too dull, too reflective. It's like surviving medieval ophthalmology, and you didn't sign up for this. You let your gaze drift to the ground, hoping to look humble, rational, very normal human being-like. But you quickly realize that staring too long downward has its own interpretation. It can mean brooding, melancholy, or trying to avoid showing the evil in your eyes. Great. You can't look up, can't look into nothing, and apparently can't look down either. Medieval eye contact etiquette is a minefield with no winning strategy. You lift your eyes just slightly, just enough to seem aware but not trance-like. And of course, that's exactly when a rooster shrieks from the darkness, making you jump and glance sharply to your left. A woman gasps. Because sudden head movements? Oh yes, another suspicious sign. You open your mouth to explain, but no explanation would make sense here. Sorry, the chicken startled me, is not a recognized defense against spiritual suspicion. You keep walking, deciding to focus your gaze on ordinary things, the dirt, the door frames, the flickering torches, anything to look like you see only what humans should see. But the problem is, now you're thinking so consciously about where your eyes are pointing that your whole face feels stiff. It's like forgetting how to walk because someone pointed out that you're walking. You lock into that awkward state where you feel guilty just for having eyes. A man carrying firewood glances at you and murmurs something you can't quite hear. You catch only the last part. Strange look about him. And you realize that staring into nothing isn't just a momentary mistake here. It's a label now. Something people attach silently, then pass around like a loaf of slightly moldy bread. You continue down the road, the sky widening above you, the stars softening into a dust of pale sparks. You want to admire them, to breathe in the vastness, but you resist the impulse. Not here, not under watchful eyes. Your mind drifts anyway, slipping into that pleasant, floaty state where thoughts loosen and imagination stretches its legs. But you keep your outward gaze anchored, fighting the urge to look like someone lost in wonder. Wonder, after all, is dangerous here. Wonder looks too much like visions. And visions? Visions get people labeled. You press onward, determined not to let your gaze betray you again. But the night is long, and the road is filled with more dangers, many of them invisible, many imagined, all of them very real in their consequences. You walk a little farther, letting the road settle under your feet as the torches behind you fade into soft, wavering specks. The night air feels cleaner out here, almost crisp, and for a moment you allow yourself to relax just a little. But that moment doesn't last, because as you weave between the dark shapes of barns and low stone walls, you hear laughter drifting through the air. Not cheerful laughter, not festival laughter, just awkward, slightly misplaced laughter. And it hits you. In the medieval world, laughing at the wrong time is practically a neon sign that says, "Might be mad." You round a bend and see the saucer man standing near a stack of hay bales, chuckling to himself while two neighbors watch with growing unease. His laughter pops into the quiet night like firecrackers, loud, random, out of rhythm with the world around him. The villagers exchange glances that carry more meaning than actual words ever could. You step closer, as naturally as possible, because you don't want to seem like you're sneaking. Sneaking is suspicious. Walking too quietly is suspicious. Breathing wrong is suspicious. Honestly, existing here requires the precision of a tightrope walker and the emotional stability of a monk who's had 8 hours of sleep and herbal tea. The man's laughter rings out again, shrill, too sudden. And the villagers shift, pulling their cloaks tighter. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind. Medieval societies often connected misplaced laughter to a disturbance of the humours, especially an excess of black bile or yellow bile. Too much black bile? You're melancholic and unpredictable. Too much yellow bile? You're overheated, impulsive, and possibly seeing things no one else can. Either way, laughter at the wrong moment wasn't comedic, it was diagnostic. The man laughs again, louder, and you swear you can feel every nearby villager tense like startled deer. But here's the quirky detail. Some medieval writers believed that unprompted laughter meant a spirit, usually a mischievous or fool-making demon, was pinching a person from the inside. Yes, pinching. The idea was that demons amused themselves by poking or tickling the organs, making a person burst into odd giggles. Picture an invisible troublemaker going, boop, to your spleen. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine folk belief or simply poetic exaggeration by pre-modern theologians who needed to spice up their manuscripts. You slow your pace, watching as the man's laughter finally sputters into silence. He wipes at his eyes, still smiling faintly, and for a moment he seems normal. Then he laughs again at absolutely nothing. The two villagers take a step back. One mutters, "Moon-touched." The other murmurs, "Something's not right in his head." You keep moving, doing your best to appear neutral, but you instantly become hyper-aware of your own face. Suddenly, you're policing every micro-expression. Your mouth feels too stiff, your cheeks feel too loose. Now you're worrying that if something funny, or even mildly amusing pops into your mind, you'll laugh at the wrong moment and doom yourself socially. You imagine tripping on a rock and laughing about it, and then half the village deciding you've been touched by a spirit. You suppress the urge to smile at the thought. Suppressing smiles makes people suspicious too. Of course it does. The medieval world has no chill. A dog trots by, glancing at you with the judgment of a creature who's seen too much. It pauses, sniffs the air, and you swear it tilts its head just slightly, as if evaluating your sanity. Animals, after all, were treated like early warning systems. If a dog reacted strangely to someone's laughter or lack of laughter, that person might be marked as unstable. And if livestock avoided you, that rumor could stick to your reputation harder than mud on a wool cloak. You continue along the path, and soon another scene unfolds. A woman talking with two men near a fence. They're discussing crop yields, which is about as thrilling as watching paint dry on a rock. But suddenly, one of the men lets out a short laugh, just a little puff of amusement, and both the woman and the other man go utterly still. Their eyes snap to him. It wasn't an inappropriate laugh. It wasn't even loud. But timing is everything here. He clears his throat quickly, realigning his face like someone trying to reset their entire personality. You can see the panic flicker in his eyes. If he laughs again, especially without a clear reason, this conversation is heading straight off a cliff. Eventually, his companions relax, but only after a long, awkward beat. You exhale, without realizing you were holding your breath. You walk deeper into the dark, and the memory of the haystack laughter man lingers behind you like an echo. You feel the pressure building around your own emotions. You become aware of how easily your mind wanders to strange thoughts when you're tired, how bleary late-night moments can make anything funny. But here, if you mistime a chuckle while passing a shrine or a crossroads, people might believe you're mocking the saints or laughing with unseen devils. You catch yourself smirking at a mental image, a medieval demon tickling someone's spleen, of all things, and immediately wipe the expression off your face like you're erasing a chalk mark. Perfect. Now that looked suspicious. You adjust your cloak, Keep your gaze forward and do your best not to think of anything remotely funny, which of course makes everything twice as funny. You try humming quietly to distract your mind, but humming at night is another suspicious behavior you'll deal with later. In this world, emotions aren't private. Every flicker of your mouth is evidence. Every misplaced laugh is data. And every moment where you let your mind drift into amusement is a moment someone might label madness. So you keep walking, trying your best to control your thoughts, your face, your timing, your thief, everything, because out here, the line between normal and mad is thin enough to slice bread. And tonight, you're walking that line with balancing act precision. You push onward, deeper into the dim stretch of road, where the laughter behind you fades into something distant and uneasy. The air here feels heavier, as if the night itself is tightening around your shoulders. You breathe slowly, trying to keep your thoughts calm, because by now you know that anything you express outwardly, even unintentionally, can become evidence against you. And that's exactly when you hear it. A soft, irregular sniffle, slicing through the quiet. You pause. At first, you think someone nearby is fighting off the cold, but then the sound grows fuller, wet, wavering, unmistakably the sound of someone crying. You take a few steps forward and spot her. A woman sitting on a low stone bench beside a small shrine, shoulders shaking, eyes red from tears. The shrine's candle burns low, smearing its golden light across her face like a sorrowful streak. She isn't keening or wailing. She isn't moaning into the heavens. She's just crying. Simple human sadness. The stuff every modern person understands instantly. But here, in this village, crying without a clear, visible reason is one of the surest ways to earn the label mad. You slow your approach, partly to avoid startling her, but mostly because you know how the villagers will interpret this moment, not just her tears, but your reaction to them. And sure enough, two figures stand nearby in the shadows, watching her with a mixture of fear and fascination. They're whispering scratches at the silence like mice in a grain cellar. She's been like this since morning, one murmurs. No cause for it, says the other. No cause means danger. You feel a chill slip under your cloak. A mainstream historical fact flashes in your mind. Medieval medical texts often associated unprovoked weeping with an excess of phlegm or black bile, signs of melancholia, which wasn't romanticized sadness but a deeply feared mental and spiritual disorder. Doctors wrote about it with the seriousness of describing an approaching storm. Melancholia could make you unpredictable, unstable, spiritually permeable. Tears were not seen as emotional release. They were symptoms. The woman lifts her face slightly, tears glimmering as she inhales shakily. The two villagers lean in closer, not out of compassion, but out of caution. They are studying her like she's an omen that hasn't yet declared its meaning. And then comes the fringe belief that makes you shiver a little harder. Some folk traditions held that unprovoked crying meant a wandering spirit was perched on a person's shoulder, whispering grief directly into their soul. Sometimes the spirit was said to be a dead relative. Sometimes it was something far less comforting. Historians still argue whether this shoulder spirit idea was widespread, or mostly confined to certain superstitious pockets, but the fear it evoked was very real. The woman sobs once more, a single, raw sound, and you see the villagers take a step back. Not toward her, away from her, as though the sadness might leap off her shoulders and onto theirs. You feel torn between the instinct to comfort her and the instinct to protect your own fragile, medieval reputation. If you show too much concern for unexplained crying, people may assume you share her imbalance. If you show too little, you risk seeming cold or emotionless, a different flavor of suspicious. Because in this world, every choice spirals outward like ripples in a pond. You settle on a careful middle path. You step closer, but slowly, and speak gently. Are you all right? Her tear-glossed eyes find yours. She blinks, sniffles, and shakes her head softly. She tries to speak but only releases a small, choked breath. And there it is, the problem. No explanation. No concrete cows. No dead relative lying in the street. No broken pottery. No tragedy you can point to and say, "Ah, yes, this is why." Behind you, one of the villagers whispers urgently, "See? No reason. Madness starts from tears that come from nowhere." The other responds, "Better not stand too close." You almost laugh, not because the situation is funny, but because the logic is so painfully medieval. But laughing near a crying person would be a terrible idea. People would think you're mocking her or even sharing her madness in opposite form. So you hold your face in a calm, neutral shape and keep your voice soft. "It's all right," you whisper to the woman. "Just breathe." She wipes her nose with the back of her sleeve and nods weakly. You see her trying to form a reason for her sadness. Something the villagers will accept. Something that will save her reputation. But nothing comes. And the fear in her eyes grows as she realizes the danger of her own tears. You imagine, for yourself crying here, in this world, maybe after a long day or a painful moment, modern tears, healthy tears, human tears. But here, crying without cause isn't a release. It's a crime of the body, a sign that your inner humors are staging a coup. A dog trots by and pauses near the woman, sniffing hesitantly. One of the villagers gasps, because if an animal reacts strangely to a crying person, the village takes it as confirmation of spiritual disturbance. The dog tilts its head, confused, and moves on. The villagers nod grimly. To them, the dog wasn't confused. It was warning them. You exhale, frustrated by the invisible rules that govern this world. You want to tell them the truth, that people cry for 1,000 reasons, most of them invisible, none of them demonic. But saying that here might make them question your mind. You step back slowly, giving the woman a final, gentle nod. She pulls her cloak tighter and lowers her gaze. The villagers continue watching her, both of you, with the kind of suspicion that sticks to your skin. As you walk away, you hear one of them murmur, "If she cries again tomorrow, the healer must be called. Or the priest." You keep your pace even, but inside you feel the pressure mounting again. Here, tears aren't just water, they're warning signs. And emotions aren't private, they're public property monitored by people who fear the unseen more than the visible. And as you disappear into the darkness of the next road, you can't shake the feeling that the woman's unprovoked tears were only the beginning of the fears that await you on this long, medieval night. You move away from the shrine, the soft echo of the woman's tears lingering behind you like a thread the night hasn't quite cut. The road tightens again, hemmed in by leaning cottages and lopsided fences, and the ground becomes rougher beneath your feet. You focus on the rhythm of your steps, anything to keep your mind from drifting where it shouldn't. But focusing too hard makes you aware of something else. The villagers who cried, laughed, or stared oddly were always watched for more than just their expressions. They were watched for how they moved, and as you walk, you suddenly realize you're being evaluated the same way. Ahead of you, a crooked lantern hangs from a post, its flame twitching like it's nervous. Under its weak light, you catch sight of a man pacing back and forth in a tight little line worn into the dirt. His hands twist in front of him, fingers interlacing and releasing like anxious knots. It would be an unremarkable scene in your world. People pace when they're thinking, when they're stressed, when they're bored. But here, odd walking patterns are practically a diagnostic category of their own. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval physicians genuinely believed that the way someone walked revealed the balance or imbalance of their humors. A too quick stride suggested overheated yellow bile. A dragging, shuffling gait suggested excess black bile. If you walked in circles, you weren't deep in thought, you were spirit-touched. Even gait manuals existed, serious texts describing what normal, healthy walking should look like. Spoiler, it looked almost nothing like how actual medieval streets forced people to walk. You slow your pace slightly to avoid drawing attention to yourself. Too slow looks brooding, too fast looks manic, too controlled is suspicious, too loose is worse. Honestly, it's like auditioning for a role you didn't know you signed up for. The pacing man stops abruptly and glances your way. His eyes hold that unfocused shine you've now seen a few times tonight, people overwhelmed by feelings they're not allowed to express. He takes a few hesitant steps toward you, and behind him, a cluster of neighbors stiffens immediately. One whispers, "See? There it is again." Another mutters, "The devil twists his feet." You try not to react, though internally your eyebrows are trying to leap off your face. But here comes the quirky tidbit, the one that makes you question medieval physics entirely. Some folk beliefs claimed that odd walking patterns meant a person's feet were being tugged by unseen hands. Mischievous spirits were thought to yank at ankles, pulling people off their natural path. That's why pacing, wandering in circles, or walking with sudden jerks wasn't considered stress, it was considered possession-light, as if demons enjoyed treating people like marionettes. Historians still argue whether villagers genuinely believed this, or if it was just a dramatic explanation that stuck because it sounded good during evening gossip sessions. You continue walking normally, or what you hope resembles normal here, and pass the pacing man with a polite nod. He returns the nod, but continues his erratic movement, the villagers watching him cross themselves. One murmurs something about calling the healer at dawn. Another says the priest must be informed. Someone else mutters, "He walked funny last week too," as if building a case file. You leave them behind, but the moment stays with you. It makes you hyper-aware of your own steps. Suddenly, your feet feel too coordinated, too conscious. Now you're walking like someone who's thinking about walking, which is never good. You try letting your stride relax, but then it feels too relaxed. You straighten up, but now you look stiff. You try swinging your arms a little, then immediately regret it because that feels like overcorrecting. You're spiraling, and the road hasn't helped. Its uneven stones force your feet to adjust constantly. Amazing. You've managed to become self-conscious about walking. Medieval paranoia, 1, you, 0. You round a corner, and a woman gathering firewood glances up at you with mild curiosity. She watches the length of your stride, your posture, the placement of your hands. When you pass too close to a puddle and sidestep it, her eyebrows twitch. The sidestep was too quick, wasn't it? Or too graceful? Or too exaggerated? You're basically cosplaying as a normal medieval citizen at this point. A man exits a nearby house, carrying a bundle of herbs, and notices the woman watching you. He joins her, following your movements with clinical intensity. You fight the urge to wave and shout, "Perfectly sane walk here, don't mind me." But announcing normality is itself suspicious. You settle for adjusting your pace again, hoping to strike that impossible balance between calm and purposeful. The path widens momentarily near a small corral where two goats chew lazily, utterly unbothered by the world's emotional turbulence. But even goats play a role in this surveillance culture. As you walk by, one goat stares at you long, unblinking, judgy. The villagers notice everything, including this. One whispers, "Goats sense madness." Another nods, deeply serious. "Fantastic. Goats are your mental health evaluators now." You keep going, determined not to let livestock dictate your sanity score. A few minutes later, you reach a crossroads, where an old wooden cross stands slightly crooked, draped in withered flowers. A man leans there, swaying a little, not drunkenly, just rhythmically, as though his feet can't quite find agreement with the earth. His gait stutters in small side-to-side motions, and he sways again before catching himself on the post. Two teenagers nearby whisper behind their hands. You catch only fragments. Keeps wandering. Steps like a day. Cursed man. Mother's worried. He notices you watching and offers a sheepish half-smile, but the villagers around him back away slightly. His uneven gait has already tainted his reputation. The moment you attempt to move past him, a faint rock on the ground trips your foot just a little, just a fraction. You stumble, not a full stumble, not even noticeable in your world. But here, a gasp echoes somewhere behind you. You regain your balance quickly, heart pounding, but the damage is done. In medieval eyes, even a tiny misstep could hint at instability. People stumble when their thoughts are in chaos. People stagger when spirits tug at them. People trip when their humors wobble. You hear whispers. "Did you see? Unsteady. Best keep an eye on him. Wonderful. One pebble just made you a case study." You quicken your pace slightly, not enough to seem nervous, just enough to leave behind that cluster of whispering mouths. But of course, walking too fast might look manic. You slow down again. Now you look hesitant. You adjust your posture, fix your stride, and try to look like someone who has never once thought about walking in their life. You breathe out hard. The truth is, medieval society doesn't give you space to be human, to misstep, to fidget, to pace because you're thinking. Here, walking patterns aren't just habits, they're omens. And villagers study them with the intensity modern people reserve for sports replays or celebrity scandals. You move into the next stretch of road, cloak rustling softly, footsteps as even as you can manage. You aren't sure what's ahead, but you know one thing clearly now. In the Middle Ages, your feet can betray you just as easily as your face. You leave the crossroads behind, stepping into a quieter pocket of the village, where the night feels thicker, heavier, almost as if it's waiting for something. The road narrows again, framed by sagging cottages and fences patched more times. than you can count. A faint breeze drifts past, carrying the scent of damp straw and chimney smoke. You listen to it, grateful for the momentary calm, until you realize that in the Middle Ages, being out at night at all is practically an invitation for trouble, especially if you happen to be moving around when no one else is. Because in this world, night wanderers are walking red flags. You try to steady your pace, reminding yourself that everything you do, every sound, every breath, every step, is a detail someone can interpret. But no amount of caution changes the fact that the streets right now belong to people who shouldn't be out. Thieves, drunks, spirits, and anyone who walks without clear purpose. So, basically you. A shutter creaks open above you. Someone peeks out just long enough to identify you as a moving figure, then snaps the shutter shut again. But the damage is done, you've been noted. Villager Hashan42 has mentally filed your presence under suspicious nocturnal activity. A mainstream historical fact flickers through your thoughts. In medieval communities, night wanderers were often suspected of madness, possession, or moral corruption. Ordinary folk stayed indoors after dark because night was the domain of the supernatural. If you wandered at night, you were either looking for trouble or being guided by something troubling. Even laws existed in some places restricting nighttime movement, not just for crime prevention, but because people genuinely feared what the darkness might awaken inside a person. Great. So your midnight stroll is basically a psychological crime. You walk a little farther, keeping your footsteps soft. But soft footsteps aren't great either. Quiet movement is suspicious. Loud movement is disruptive. This world is a non-stop performance review, and nobody asked your opinion. Ahead, a figure moves between two cottages, a thin silhouette drifting like a loose thread in the wind. As you get closer, you hear her, muttering under her breath, pacing slowly in a crooked loop. It's an older woman, hair wild around her shoulders, eyes unfocused. She wanders without urgency, without clear direction, without noticing the world around her. Every few steps, she pauses, whispers something to the dark, and resumes her aimless, slow-motion wandering. Immediately, 3 villagers across the lane stop talking and stare at her. One holds a candle that casts a quivering glow. The flame trembles as if it's nervous too. "She's at it again," one whispers. "She roams at night, no reason," another murmurs. "Madness walks her like a dog," the third adds grimly. You swallow. The woman doesn't look dangerous, she looks tired, worn down, hollowed out by something she can't name. In your world, she might be sleepless, grieving, worried, overwhelmed. But here, no acceptable scenario involves walking at night without a clear excuse like fetching water or put out the fire before it eats the barn. Anything else is madness. You take another step, but this time you make the fatal mistake of pausing to observe her. The villagers see you watching, and their attention shifts. Not fully, just enough. 2 suspicious people in one place. That's very medieval suspicious math. The woman suddenly stops pacing, looks up at the moon, and lets out a thin sigh. The villagers make the sign of the cross in near unison. One hisses. The moon pulls her mind straight from her skull. And here comes the quirky tidbit. One medieval belief claimed that wandering at night allowed the moon to influence your brain, especially during its fuller phases. The moon wasn't just an orb in the sky. It was a force, a puppeteer. People who walked under its light were said to be especially vulnerable to madness, because the moon could tug on the humors like tides. Historians still argue whether this was universal belief or local superstition, but either way, moon-touched was a very common insult. You keep walking, resisting the urge to glance up at the moon yourself. Because what if someone sees you looking? What if they think you're feeling the pull? You turn down another lane, but now every sound feels amplified. A twig snaps under your foot. Someone gasps softly in the distance. The dog growls at a shadow, possibly yours. You speed up, then slow down, then panic internally about whether you've now looked like someone fleeing a crime. As you pass a house with a fogged window, you spot a man peeking through a small gap in the shutters. He squints, sees you, and his expression tightens. You can almost hear his thoughts. Why is this person out so late? Where are they going? Who walks alone at this hour? You want to shout, "I'm just narrating my life in medieval second-person immersion." But that would definitely not help. Instead, you keep moving, cloak pulled tight. Your footsteps echo in ways footsteps shouldn't at this hour. Every sound becomes suspicious because sound is evidence. The villagers believe madness grows in the quiet hours when everyone else sleeps, because demons roam freely then. Anyone awake might be communing, collaborating, or corrupted. You pass a well where an older man sits hunched over, elbows on his knees. He looks exhausted and slightly dazed, as if sleep has abandoned him entirely. His eyes flick toward you, then away. You can see the fear in them, not fear of you, but fear that he himself might be slipping into night madness. He mutters to no one. The night pulls thoughts from my head. You pause. He pauses too, realizing what he just admitted aloud. A dangerous confession. You decide not to linger. You don't want to witness whatever comes next. The villagers have a way of turning minor confessions into major accusations. A few steps later, you spot another figure moving silently, cloak brushing the ground, face hidden. They don't glance at you. They don't hurry. They glide like someone with a purpose only they understand. And in this world, having secret purpose at night is worse than having no purpose at all. Your breath quickens. Every instinct tells you that being awake right now is making your reputation worse by the second. Out here, the dark isn't just the absence of light, it's the presence of suspicion. You walk faster now, your nerves tight, your senses sharpened. The night feels alive around you, watching, listening, judging. You finally reach a stretch of path where no houses crowd the sides. A patch of open field lies ahead, silent and moon-washed. You step into it, feeling the sky expand above you. But the moment brings no relief, only the realization that wandering the night in medieval times is a habit that marks you just as surely as a scar. Because here, nighttime isn't just a time, it's a verdict. And tonight, it's one you're fighting every step of the way. You leave the moon-washed field behind, slipping once more into the narrow arteries of the village. The night air nips at your cheeks, and the silence feels stretched thin like parchment pulled too tight. You're grateful for the stillness, but also painfully aware that being out here at this hour already puts you on thin ice with the locals. And tonight, you're about to step onto even thinner ice. Because as you walk past a sagging cottage with a crooked chimney, you hear something that freezes you in place. A voice. Soft, low, muttering. But it's not a conversation. There's no second voice. No footsteps. Just one person talking. You edge closer and spot a man sitting beneath the tiny overhang of his doorway, hands clasped, head bowed slightly, murmuring steadily into the dark. His whispers loop and twist, unintelligible but rhythmic, like fragments of thoughts trying to escape. You realize with a jolt that he's talking to himself, and in the medieval world, talking to yourself may as well be a signed confession of madness. You stand, still, unsure whether approaching is wise. Not because you fear him, but because the villagers fear people like him. And fear here doesn't stay in the mind. Fear becomes action. A mainstream historical fact flickers to the surface of your thoughts. Medieval medical texts often described self-communing, the act of talking aloud with no listener, as a clear sign of disturbed humors, especially in those suffering from melancholia or mania. Physicians wrote that words spoken to oneself were evidence the mind had turned inward, no longer anchored to reality. To them, a person talking to themselves wasn't processing thoughts. They were losing the ability to distinguish thought from speech. You shift your weight, trying not to crunch leaves, but the sound escapes anyway. The murmuring man stops. Slowly, he lifts his head. His eyes meet yours. They're not wild or dangerous. They're tired, overloaded. The eyes of someone carrying thoughts too heavy to keep silent. And yet, before you can even decide whether to greet him, the window beside the cottage bangs open. A woman leans out, trembling hands gripping the sill. "He's at it again," she whispers harshly. The spirits whisper in that one's ear. Another window opens diagonally across the lane. A head emerges, then another. Because self-talk here? It isn't normal. It isn't private. It isn't safe. People don't assume you're thinking aloud. They assume someone or something is whispering back. You want to speak up. Maybe say something comforting. But the muttering man suddenly brings a hand to his mouth and resumes his quiet talking. This time you hear a fragment. "Stop. No. Not now." A wave ripples through the watcher's fear, thick and immediate. He's arguing with them. Someone hisses. "Who?" A child whispers, voice trembling. "The unseen ones." Fantastic. The medieval brain never misses a chance for supernatural dramatics. You take a slow step back, not wanting to escalate the tension. But now, the villagers' eyes slide toward you, because you are standing very close to someone they believe is conversing with invisible forces. If they assume you're listening to the spirits too, you'll have your own reputation crisis before dawn. You clear your throat gently and offer the man a quiet nod, then begin to turn away. But the muttering man abruptly says, "It's fine," as if answering something you didn't hear. You freeze again. Now everyone freezes. A door creaks open. A priest steps out, robe dragging along the dirt. His expression is grave, not fearful, but weary, like a man who has done too many midnight spirit checks for one lifetime. He speaks to shadows, the priest murmurs, or the shadows speak to him. He approaches the muttering man slowly, hands clasped, and you see the man shrink a flinch of shame, dread, or perhaps exhaustion. You can't tell. You know you should keep walking. Every instinct tells you to leave before the priest wonders why you are standing in this nighttime drama. But you're caught by something human in the scene, the rawness of it, the unfairness, the fragile edge of someone struggling with their own mind while the world interprets them through a lens of fear. But this moment is exactly when the quirky medieval tidbit sneaks in. Some villagers believed that self-talkers weren't talking to spirits, they were letting their own soul escape through the mouth. The idea was that the soul could wander if you weren't careful, slipping out through an open mouth like a breath. People feared self-talkers might lose their souls entirely, leaving only a mad shell behind. Historians still argue whether this belief had strong roots or was limited to a few imaginative communities. But either way, the fear was real enough to fuel suspicion. The priest kneels in front of the man, murmuring a soft prayer. It's not an exorcism, at least not yet, but it's close. A preventative measure. A spiritual security check. You decide to move before someone asks why you're observing so intently. You slip away down the lane, heart thumping softly. But as you walk, your mind becomes dangerously aware of something. You talk to yourself sometimes. Not loudly, not muttering secrets to the void, just little things. Habitual, reflexive. You whisper reminders. You hum fragments of thoughts. You narrate your steps a little. And suddenly you realize that here, right here, any of that could be twisted into suspicion. If someone hears you whispering your plans, they might assume you're bargaining with forces they fear. If someone hears you mutter under your breath because you stubbed your toe, they might decide you're slipping into madness. As you turn onto another dim street, you pass a man stacking firewood. He looks exhausted, and you hear him mutter, "Too many chores," under his breath. But he catches himself immediately, glancing around with a flash of panic to see if anyone heard him. He meets your eyes briefly, and you both understand the unspoken truth. In this world, thoughts must stay inside your head. Words spoken into empty air are invitations to judgment, to fear, to intervention. You continue your walk, hyper-aware of the silence surrounding you. It's fragile, strained. Every instinct tells you to say something aloud, to confirm your own presence, your own sanity. But you keep your lips pressed shut. You don't dare give the night anything to misunderstand. You walk deeper into the village, the road widening just enough for a cart to pass, though at this hour, the only things moving are shadows and your own unsettled thoughts. The cool air tastes faintly of smoke and something earthy, maybe damp grain or the lingering smell of stew from a household that actually remembered to put out their fire. You try to steady your nerves, reminding yourself to blend in, to appear normal, to be careful with every movement. But then a new smell drifts to you, roasting meat mingled with sharp herbs, and your stomach growls loudly. Loudly enough that you wince. And that's when you spot the small outdoor hearth ahead, glowing with low embers, a pot hooked above it. A man sits beside it, stirring something that looks hearty and overcooked in that medieval way where texture is optional. He looks up as you pass, and eyes you like he's waiting to evaluate whether your appetite is normal. Because in this world, unusual eating habits are a screaming red flag. You try to keep your expression neutral, though the food smells good enough to make your brain stage a coup. The man gestures with his spoon. You hungry? You hesitate, because here's the problem. If you say yes too quickly, people assume gluttony, one of the 7 deadly and socially problematic sins. Too hungry? Madness of the stomach, or madness of the soul, or both. If you say no? Well, refusing food is suspicious too. Very suspicious. People who skip meals without clear cause are thought to be spiritually unmoored or harboring hidden illness of the mind. It's ridiculous by modern standards, but this is the medieval world, where your appetite is diagnostic. Your hunger level is practically a medical chart. You mumble, "I'm fine." A mistake. The man's eyebrows twitch. Behind him, his wife emerges from the doorway, catching just that moment. Her gaze sharpens. He turned down food, she whispers to her husband, as if you're too far away to. Here. In the cold, he murmurs gravely. That's not right. No, not right at all. Perfect. You've barely spoken, and already you're the star of their evening paranoia. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind like an annoying pop-up window. Medieval people believed that appetite revealed the state of your humors. A balanced person felt hunger at proper times and ate proper amounts. Too little appetite indicated an excess of melancholy, the dreaded black bile. Too much appetite indicated heat or lust or spiritual disorder. Meals weren't merely food. They were health rituals, watched with the intensity of people grading a performance. You can practically feel the lecture forming in the woman's mind right now. Someone who refuses hot food may be losing grip on the earthly world. You force a small smile and add, "Just ate not long ago." Because maybe lying is better than being labeled. But the woman's expression doesn't soften. "On the road?" she presses. Her voice carries that tone, the tone that means she already has theories, unsettling theories. You nod lightly, trying to look casual. Yes, still full. Her eyes narrow. Full at night? Her husband's face hardens. Not normal. You want to say, what about stress? What about traveling? What about the universal human experience of being too tired to eat? But none of those excuses exist here. Eating is medicine. Not eating means the medicine isn't working. Just when you think this moment can't get any more medieval, the quirky tidbit surfaces one of those beliefs that makes you question how people survived this era mentally intact. Some medieval communities thought refusing food meant you were courting the influence of wandering spirits who disliked the human appetite. In other words, if you didn't eat, it might mean a demon was whispering that earthly nourishment was beneath you. Historians still argue whether this belief was widespread or localized folklore, but the fear surrounding appetite was absolutely real. You take a few steps away from the couple, eager to escape their stares, but now your own hunger becomes a liability. You don't want to appear too eager for food, but you also don't want to look indifferent. So you adopt a steady, neutral face, the "I am a normal human who eats normal quantities at normal times" expression. Honestly, it should be an acting award category. The lane bends, revealing more houses with torchlit windows. And, of course, this is exactly when your stomach betrays you again with a loud, unmistakable growl. Someone gasps. Two women standing near a doorway look up sharply. One clutches her shawl. The other leans toward her and whispers, "Did you hear that? Hunger at this hour?" His humors are restless. Your soul leaves your body briefly. Hunger, at night, is suspicious? Apparently yes, because medieval people believed nighttime hunger suggested humoral, imbalance, or inner turmoil. Perhaps even the early stages of night madness, a condition noted by some healers where disturbed spirits stirred the appetite at improper times. You're learning too much about medieval body politics, and all of it is exhausting. You clear your throat. "Just tired," you say loudly enough for them to hear. Because tiredness is an acceptable reason for literally any strange behavior. One woman nods uncertainly. The other still looks unconvinced. Wonderful. You continue your walk, and soon you pass another house where a family is eating late supper around a table lit by a smoky tallow candle. As you pass, a child glances up at you and asks loudly, "Why isn't he eating?" The adults freeze. Their eyes snap toward you. Their mouths tighten in simultaneous concern. "I already ate." You lie again. A man at the table frowns. "Then why does he walk?" His wife murmurs, "Food not settling, right?" Another mutters, "Or mind not settling at all." You feel like you've become a walking documentary of how to accidentally fail medieval society 101. You pick up the pace, but only slightly, not enough to seem frantic. A moment later, you land in front of a bakery where stale bread sits in baskets outside. Even the bread stares at you with suspicion. Behind the counter window, an elderly baker eyes you like he's reading a prophecy on your face. And then he says it. "You don't look like a man who's properly fed." You panic internally. What does that even mean? Are you too thin? Too pale? Too alive? I'm fine, you say. He squints. Fine men don't walk hungry. You resist the urge to scream. You move on quickly, quietly, keeping your eyes down. This entire village has decided your eating habits are a window into your madness, and you're terrified of what they'll decide next. At last, you reach a dark stretch of road where no windows glow. You breathe out heavily, shoulders slumping. But, even as the night air cools your face, you know the truth. In this world, even hunger is a test. Even appetite is a performance. And every bite you do or don't take can tip the scale between normal and mad. You readjust your cloak, steady your breath, and keep going. Because the night and its judgments aren't done with you yet. You move onward, letting the cool night air settle inside your lungs as your footsteps press along the uneven dirt lane. You've barely recovered from being judged for your eating habits when you stumble into another invisible tripwire of medieval social expectations, one you would never expect, and yet one that could destroy your reputation faster than anything else so far. All it takes is one innocent decision. You pass a small tavern, more of a wooden room with benches and a low fire than a real establishment, but the scent of ale hangs thick around it. Voices bubble softly inside, and you can hear that warm, tipsy hum of people who are collectively unwinding with the only recreational beverage most medieval folks trust. A man stands outside the door, tankard in hand, cheeks flushed, laughing too loudly at a joke you didn't hear. When he notices you approaching, his grin widens. "Traveller," he calls, lifting his tankard. "Join us for a drink." You slow, and your heart sinks, because in this world, refusing alcohol is suspicious. Very suspicious. You offer a polite smile. "Maybe another time," you say gently. The man freezes mid-laugh, his eyebrows knit. His entire expression shifts from friendly to mildly alarmed. Inside the tavern, a few faces turn toward you. Curious, watchful. The man steps closer. "You don't drink?" You swear you can feel the whisper ripple through the tavern behind him. "Doesn't drink. Doesn't drink. What's wrong with him?" Fantastic. You've just stepped into another medieval minefield. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. In medieval Europe, ale wasn't just a drink. It was a cornerstone of daily life, safer than most water, and used as nourishment, hydration, and social glue all at once. People of all ages drank it. Declining ale wasn't merely unusual. It hinted you might be ill, morally suspect, or spiritually unbalanced. You clear your throat, trying to find the least suspicious way to phrase, "I'm good, thanks." But the man speaks first. It settles the humours, he insists, as though you've just declined medicine. Warms the blood, loosens the lungs, keeps the mind steady. Keeps the mind steady. Right. The implication hits you squarely. Not drinking means your mind might already be unsteady. This village's logic never fails to amaze. You decide to soften the refusal. "Just not thirsty," you offer carefully. The man's eyes narrow. "Not thirsty? For ale?" He says it slowly, like you've just told him you're not thirsty for oxygen. Behind him, an older woman leans by the tavern door, arms crossed. A person who rejects shared drink rejects shared trust, she warns. It isn't a threat, just a statement. But in the medieval world, statements can carry more weight than swords. Another villager steps forward. "Had a man last winter who refused ale, muttered strange things by spring." You resist the urge to say, "Correlation is not causation," because that would be the most suspicious sentence ever spoken here. Instead, you manage, "Just tired." Tired is always a safe word. It's medieval duct tape, it fixes everything. The tavern crowd relaxes only slightly. A few nod slowly, unconvinced. But at least they don't drag you inside and force a mug into your hand. You start to move on. Then from behind, someone mutters, "Refusing drink, that's a sign." You stiffen. You know this routine. One suspicious sign becomes a whisper. Whisper becomes rumor. Rumor becomes truth. Truth becomes a label you can't escape. You walk faster, not enough to look afraid, but enough to escape the mouths forming theories about your sanity. But the night has a way of continuing its tests. A few minutes later, you pass a small barn where two men are sitting on overturned barrels, sharing a jug. Their fire crackles between them, glowing orange against straw piles. One of them notices you, nods politely, then holds the jug toward you. Drink, warm yourself. He's kinder than the tavern crowd, but the expectation is the same. You raise a hand politely. No, thank you. The jug lowers slowly. The man's eyes sharpen. You sick? He asks. No. A vow? No. Your stomach off? No. I. His expression closes like a door. Then why refuse? He says softly. What everyone of sound mind accepts. You inhale through your nose, steadying your voice. Just don't need any tonight. Both men stare you down for a moment too long. Then one murmurs to the other. He speaks clear. Enough. But something's odd. The other nods gravely. You're becoming a walking backstage rumor. As you walk away, the whispers chase you. Doesn't drink. Humor's off. Maybe the priests should speak with him. Exactly what you feared. But you're not even safe from yourself. Because a few steps later, you notice something worse. You're thirsty. Very thirsty. But you can't exactly knock on a random door and say, "May I have water?" Medieval hydration rules are broken. Asking for water looks suspicious too. People drink ale because water is untrustworthy, so asking for water means you don't trust ale, which means you don't trust society. You feel your throat tighten not from thirst, but from the absurdity of it all. Then, finally, your salvation appears. A small fountain near the village square, fed by a crude pipe from a nearby spring. A few late workers fill buckets there. You drift toward it cautiously. But the moment you bend to scoop a handful of water, someone gasps, loudly. You look up to see an older man clutching his bucket. "Why drink water?" he whispers, "when ale is safer." Another adds, "Unless the mind rejects warmth." You nearly choke, you straighten up, wipe your hands, and force the most neutral smile you can muster. "Just a sip," you say. They exchange troubled glances. "Just a sip," one repeats, as though this is the strangest confession possible. You walk away quickly. You can feel it now, the new invisible mark etched into your reputation. Not drinking ale puts you in a precarious category, hovering somewhere between eccentric, unwell, and possibly whispered to by demons. Because, in the Middle Ages, drinking together was how communities bonded. Refusing to drink wasn't just about ale, it was about belonging. And tonight, your refusal has nudged you one step closer to isolation. You tug your cloak tighter and keep walking. The night watches. The villagers judge. And your reputation teeters on a thread thin enough to snap at any moment. You walk away from the fountain, trying to keep your pace steady even though your mind is spinning like a medieval water wheel under too much pressure. Every interaction tonight has been a test. Every breath judged. Every gesture scrutinized. You're barely past the ale incident when another threat emerges, one so subtle, so deceptively harmless, that you don't even notice it until it's too late. You pass a small house with light glowing faintly through the cracks. A woman stands outside, pouring water from a clay jug into a wooden basin. Steam curls upward in lazy waves. She dips a cloth, wrings it out, and begins washing her face with slow, practiced motions. She sees you, offers a polite nod, then continues her cleansing routine. Nothing strange about it, except that she doesn't stop. Face, neck, arms, hands, over and over, scrubbing with the intensity of someone trying to erase something only she can feel. And suddenly the pieces click into place, because in the medieval world, too much cleanliness is deeply suspicious. Not bathing? Sure, expected. Bathing too often? Social heresy. You slow your walk just enough to observe without staring. The woman keeps rinsing and scrubbing, and with every movement, you see the villagers' reactions forming silently in doorways and windows. People are watching her the way a modern audience watches a plot twist, careful, uncertain, waiting to see where the story goes. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. After certain periods, especially post-Black Death, many communities developed an intense distrust of excessive bathing. Bathing was linked to moral laxity, vulnerability to illness, and even spiritual weakness. Water opened the pores, they said. Water let in disease and spirits. Water disturbed the humors. Cleanliness, once prized in earlier medieval centuries, became psychologically dangerous in others. So someone who washed too much wasn't seen as hygienic, they were seen as unbalanced. And this woman? She's washing like she's trying to scrub guilt off her soul. A neighbor steps outside, arms crossed. "Again?" she calls sharply to the woman at the basin. The washing woman flinches but doesn't stop. "I just dust," she murmurs, Dust doesn't cling like that, the neighbor replies. Your mind's uneasy. Water won't fix it. You wince. The harshness stings even from a distance. Another villager joins in. A woman who washes at night invites trouble. Trouble is medieval speak for madness, or danger, or demonic influence, or all three. The washing woman shakes her head. I'm fine. But her voice trembles. And trembling is another red flag. You try to slip past unnoticed, but the neighbor's eyes catch yours. You, she calls. You've seen her do this before. You nearly choke. No, you say quickly. First time. Her eyes narrow. As long as you aren't taken with the habit, she says pointedly. Taken with the habit. Meaning, as long as you're not losing your mind too. You force a polite nod and continue walking, but inside you feel something cold bloom. Because her comment makes you suddenly painfully aware of every tiny thing you've done tonight. The way you adjusted your cloak, brushed dust off your sleeve, wiped sweat from your brow. Nothing unusual, nothing extreme. But tonight, everything feels amplified, magnified, dangerous. And when you think about the times you've washed your hands more than necessary in your own life, modern hygiene, simple preference, your stomach tightens. Here, those habits could get you labeled within minutes. But the night isn't done teaching you medieval paranoia. As you walk, you spot a man kneeling by a bucket, scrubbing vigorously at his boots. The mud is thick, clinging stubbornly, but he attacks it with almost frantic energy. Another man stops nearby, watching with raised brows. Still scrubbing? He asks. They got dirty, the kneeling man snaps. They're always dirty, the onlooker replies. But this is the third time today. A tense silence. The kneeling man slows, his shoulders sag. I just want them clean. The onlooker snorts softly. Clean boots don't clean the mind. A few other villagers turn to look. You feel the heat of their suspicion gather like fog. In their logic, anyone who obsesses over cleanliness must be trying to cleanse something internal, something unholy, shameful, or mentally disturbed. And here comes the quirky tidbit that makes the medieval world feel even stranger. According to certain folk beliefs, excessive washing was thought to thin the soul, weakening the barrier between a person and malevolent influences. Overcleaning was literally seen as washing away spiritual protection. Historians still argue whether villagers commonly believed this or whether it was a moralizing idea inserted into sermons, but the fear surrounding overbathing was absolutely real. You slip past the men, trying not to appear interested. But then something awful happens. A gust of wind kicks dust into your face. Your eyes sting. You instinctively lift your hand, wiping the grit from your skin. Then you feel a smear of dirt on your cheek and brush it away. Too thoroughly. Too carefully. Too many swipes in a row. You freeze, because you've just made the worst possible mistake. You look up and see a woman in a doorway staring at you. Not casually. Not curiously. Suspiciously. She watches the exact way your fingers stroke your cheek, watches the precision of your motions, watches the intent expression on your face. She tilts her head, lips tightening. You immediately drop your hand and pretend nothing happened. But she whispers to someone inside her house. He's washing his face. At night. Fear creeps up your spine. No. You were just wiping dust, not cleansing your soul, not performing some late-night ritual. You were just trying to see clearly. But medieval society doesn't care about context. Once again, you speed up just enough to create distance without looking like you're fleeing. The darkness deepens, wrapping around you like the night is a thick blanket smothering logic itself. You feel grimy again psychologically, emotionally. But now, you don't dare touch your face. You don't dare wipe your hands. You don't dare adjust your cloak. Every movement feels scrutinized. Your skin itches. Your hands tingle. You want to clean them so badly, but you can't. You really can't. Because tonight has taught you something unmistakable. In the medieval world, a person who cleans too much must be trying to wash away something no one else can see. And you cannot look like that person. Not tonight. Not in this village where even water has social consequences. So you walk on, hands stiff at your sides, face prickling with dust you're afraid to touch. Hoping the darkness hides your discomfort. Hoping no one is still watching. Hoping you can make it through the night without becoming another whispered warning. You keep moving. hands held awkwardly at your sides, resisting every instinct to wipe your face or brush dust from your clothes. The air feels thicker now, almost sticky against your skin, as if the night itself wants to test how long you can endure discomfort without giving away your thoughts. And as you make your way toward another small pocket of cottages, a new smell curls into your senses, faint, sour, metallic. You catch sight of a man sitting beside his doorway, slumped on a low stool. His hair is matted, his clothes stiff with old dirt, and an unmistakable odor radiates from him like a fog you can almost see. A few villagers walk in a wide arc around him, giving him the kind of berth you'd give a sleeping bear or an unexploded bomb. Their expressions are tight, wary, and that's when you remember the other side of medieval cleanliness: fear. Total lack of hygiene was also seen as madness. You can't win here. Clean too much? Suspect. Clean too little? Even more suspect. The man shifts slightly, scratching an arm with slow, absent-minded movements. You can see flakes fall from his skin. His clothes are nearly stiff from sweat and grime, and yet the sadness isn't in his dirtiness, it's in how the villagers look at him. Not with compassion, with fear. A mainstream historical fact presses into your mind. Medieval people believed the body reflected the soul. Dirt was not just dirt, it was a sign of spiritual disorder or moral collapse. Someone who stopped caring for themselves, someone who let filth accumulate, was assumed to be losing grip on their reason. Monastic records even listed neglect of hygiene as an early symptom of mental decline. A person who could not maintain basic care was believed to be succumbing to melancholy, possession, or divine punishment. You approach slowly, not wanting to cause alarm. The man doesn't seem dangerous, just exhausted, detached, like someone too weighed down to function. Two villagers whisper behind. He doesn't wash anymore. He used to. He stares at nothing and reeks like a rotting cart. His mind's gone. You wince. There's no empathy in their tone, just dread. But then comes the fringe tidbit, one you almost wish you didn't remember. In some rural communities, people believed that foul smells could trap madness inside a person. The odor was thought to seal in the disordered spirits or humors, preventing escape and salvation. Others believed the opposite, that foul smells invited evil spirits to nest, because demons supposedly preferred unclean homes and bodies. Historians still argue whether the belief in spirit-favored filth was widespread or limited to remote areas, but the association between dirt and danger was universal. The man on the stool looks up suddenly. His eyes are glassy but gentle. He seems surprised that you're even near him. Most villagers don't approach unless it's to bring food or mutter prayers. "You're out. Late," he says in a strained voice. You swallow. "So are you." He gives a hollow laugh. "Not by choice. Can't sleep." You nod, hoping your calm encourages him. But behind you, you hear more whispers. Talking at night. Filth invites strange thoughts. He might spread it. Spread it. Like madness is contagious. Like filth itself is a carrier. You feel your shoulders stiffen. You don't want to worsen his situation by being seen talking intimately with him, but you also don't want to abandon him like everyone else seems to. You offer a gentle, "I hope you rest soon," and begin to walk away. "Thank you," he murmurs, voice so small it barely reaches you. But as you turn, the villager's eyes are already on you, assessing, measuring, recalculating. You can practically hear the mental notes being made. Spoke to the unwashed man, didn't recoil, might share his condition. You resist the urge to snap. It's called empathy. Because empathy, in this world, often masquerades as suspicion. As you continue along the road, you feel the dirt on your own skin more acutely. The dust from earlier seems heavier now, clinging. You desperately want to wipe the grit from your cheek, to scratch the itch on your arm, to adjust your shirt where it sticks uncomfortably. But every movement associated with cleanliness or uncleanliness feels like a gamble. So you keep your hands still. You let the itch burn. You let the dust settle and sting. The fear of being judged for either extreme tightens your chest. You pass another cottage just as a mother pulls her child away from a muddy puddle. "Don't splash in that," she scolds sharply. Dirty children think dirty thoughts. The absurdity almost makes you laugh, but you clamp your jaw shut. Laughing at the wrong time is dangerous. You remember that too well. A few paces later, a man dumps a bucket of sour-smelling refuse onto the ground. The scent punches you in the face, rank, sharp, overwhelming, and instantly you step back. Mistake. A woman nearby narrows her eyes. Too delicate of the nose, she mutters. A man afraid of scent is a man afraid of life. You blink. Is she serious? Her husband steps out from behind her, nodding knowingly. Those who flinch from natural odors often have tender minds. Tender minds. Another accusation. At this point, even breathing feels like a liability. You make your way into a darker part of the lane where fewer eyes pry. The quiet settles around you again, heavy as a wool cloak. You let your shoulders sag a little. But the night is far from compassionate. It presses into your thoughts, making you replay every gesture. Did you wipe your cheek too vigorously earlier? Did you flinch too fast from the refuse smell? Did you look too disturbed by filth? Did you look not disturbed enough? Because in this world, filth isn't just dirt. It's meaning. It's diagnosis. It's accusation. Someone who sleeps in filth is losing themselves. Someone who avoids filth is hiding something. Someone caught between the two is walking a dangerous razor's edge, just like you. And as you continue through the night, cloak wrapped tight, skin prickling with unwiped dust, you understand the truth with claustrophobic clarity. In medieval society, even your relationship with dirt, how much you resist it, how much you tolerate it, can decide whether you're seen as sane. And tonight, that fragile line feels thinner than ever. You push deeper into the night, the narrow lanes slowly widening into a small open square littered with barrels, storage crates, and the remnants of market stalls long since closed. Here, the air feels oddly still, like the village is holding its breath. And at first you think it's just the emptiness, the hour, or the way the moon glints off the wet cobblestones. But then you notice something else. Something arranged atop a low wooden crate. Not food, not tools. Objects. Strange objects. A twisted animal bone with a hole worn cleanly through one end. A shard of painted pottery depicting an eye. A clump of dried heather tied with red string. A small wooden figure with no face. You blink. Because these aren't the items a typical villager keeps around. These are trinkets, oddities, things collected for reasons no one else understands. And in the medieval world, collecting cursed or strange objects is practically an invitation for people to label you as mad. You approach cautiously, scanning the square. Someone must own these. Someone who thought this was a good idea to display, or perhaps someone who doesn't think like everyone else. Because the moment people see someone collecting unusual things for their own amusement or comfort, they jump to a single medieval conclusion. This person is not right in the head. A soft shuffle draws your attention. A figure stands in the shadows near a stack of barrels, thin, hunched slightly, cloak wrapped too tightly around them. They're watching you. Not in a threatening way. In a nervous, almost defensive way, like someone caught exposing a private piece of themselves. You piece it together quickly. These are their objects, their treasures, their comforts or their curiosities. But to the village, they're warning signs. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval communities often interpreted unusual collections or personal artifacts as signs of spiritual imbalance or dangerous obsession. Someone who gathered oddities was assumed to be dabbling in magic, witchcraft, or unnatural fascinations, not because the objects themselves were dangerous, but because the behavior violated the norms of purposeful living. Objects needed a reason, purpose, usefulness. Anything else was suspicious. You step closer to the display, careful not to seem fascinated. Too much interest? Wrong. Too little? Wrong again. The figure emerges from the shadows, a man this time older than you. Thought, with tired eyes and a gentle, shy manner. He clutches something in his hand, keeping it partially hidden. I didn't mean to startle you, you say softly. He shakes his head. People always think I'm up to something. His voice is small, fragile, and somehow you already feel protective of him. What are these for? You ask. He hesitates, eyes darting between you and the objects. I just like them, he whispers. They're interesting. They speak to me. You stiffen. Oh no, that phrase, they speak to me, is a medieval catastrophic misstep. And right on cue, you hear a door creak open. A woman steps out of her house, holding a candle in one hand. She squints across the square, sees the man with his odd collection, sees you standing near him, and her mouth tightens into a grim line. He's gathered them again, she mutters loudly enough for others to hear. He never learns. Another villager joins her, then another. Within moments, half a fort, dozen nearly sleepless humans appearing from doorways like suspicious owls. The man clutches his hidden object closer. The fear in his eyes grows. It's harmless, he pleads quietly. Just things. But villagers never see just things. One hisses, those objects invite spirits. Another adds, he keeps bones and odd tokens. That's not natural. A third crosses herself. He's got the mad demon sickness. Told you all. Your heart sinks. This poor man is trapped in a web of superstition. And tonight, so are you by proximity alone. But then comes the quirky tidbit, sliding into your mind like an unwelcome guest. Some communities believed that collecting strange objects, especially bones, herbs, or items marked with symbols, meant a person was creating a spirit nest. Not a literal nest, but a place where demons or wayward souls could gather. One village even condemned a man for collecting colored stones, claiming he was building a home for invisible hands. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect real cultural patterns or local superstition. But the fear of cursed collections was absolutely common. The villagers begin murmuring louder now. What does he keep hidden? Touched in the head. That one. He talks to the objects. You suddenly feel every eye shift toward you as well because you are talking to him. The man senses the shift. His breath quickens. I didn't mean harm, he whispers desperately. They're just pretty things. Comforting. You nod gently. There's nothing wrong with that. But even saying that makes a few villagers gasp. You've just defended the behavior, which to them means you either agree with it or share the madness or are blind to the danger. The villagers inch closer. One woman jabs a finger toward the wooden figure. That one has no face, she warns. Only mad folk keep faceless things. And look at this bone. Another says, animals don't give bones willingly. He found it near the woods. That spot is cursed. You feel the tension coil tighter around the square, and you realize the only safe move is to create gentle distance. You take a slow step back. Not hurried, not dramatic, just careful. Good night, you say to the man softly. He nods, eyes full of disappointment but also understanding. Good night. As you walk away, the villagers murmur behind you. About him, about his objects, about you, briefly, then mostly about him again. You disappear back into the shadows, heart heavier than before. Because tonight you've learned something sharp and unsettling. In the medieval world, curiosity is dangerous, wonder is suspect. Objects without purpose become omens, and people who gather them become warnings. You adjust your cloak, keeping your gaze forward. Because now, you're starting to understand that every harmless joy or habit can become a sentence in this world, especially if the villagers decree it so. You slip away from the tense square, walking quietly until the murmurs fade behind you. The road narrows again, forcing you toward a small stone chapel perched at the edge of the village. Its single window glows faintly from within, casting a smear of warm, trembling light onto the cold ground. You feel the shift immediately. This part of the village carries a different kind of watchfulness. Not the social kind, the spiritual kind. Because here, every gesture, every breath near holy space, is scrutinized through a sharper lens. And tonight, you're about to brush against one of the strangest, most double-edged beliefs in the medieval world. Obsessive prayers could be a sign of madness. You approach slowly, the gentle hum of chanting drifting through the chapel door, soft, repetitive, almost hypnotic. At first it sounds peaceful. A man praying alone is nothing unusual, but as you draw closer, the chanting grows sharper, faster, more desperate. And then you see him through the window. A lone villager kneeling at the altar, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles shine like bone. He rocks slightly with each whispered prayer, murmuring the same phrase again and again, as though trying to pin his thoughts to the words before they escape. You stop in the shadows, because you've seen enough tonight to know that this repetition, this urgency, isn't considered devotion in this era. It's considered danger. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval people deeply valued piety, but they also believed that excessive piety, uncontrolled, obsessive prayer, was a sign the mind had tipped into imbalance. Priests wrote in confession manuals about scrupulosity, a condition where the need to pray became compulsive. People who prayed too often, too mechanically, or too passionately were suspected of melancholy, divine punishment, or spiritual possession. Prayer had to be measured, purposeful, not devoured like this. Inside the chapel, the man's voice rises suddenly, cracking on the edges of a frantic plea. Keep them away, keep them away. The hairs on your arms lift. You lean against the wall, unsure whether to approach or retreat. The chapel door stands slightly ajar, letting a sliver of warm light spill out onto the ground. And then, right as you consider leaving, a soft creak snaps behind you. You turn and see her. An older woman wrapped in a shawl, face taut with worry. Her eyes flick from you to the chapel window. She exhales softly. He's been at it for hours, she whispers. Won't stop, not even to drink. You remain silent, unsure how she wants you to respond. She shakes her head slowly. Prayer like that isn't holy. It's madness tugging the mind. Her voice carries both fear and sorrow. Another villager arrives, a man carrying a lantern, and joins her. He prayed this way last spring, he murmurs darkly, right before he claimed angels were whispering behind the rafters. The woman crosses herself. You swallow, because the more they speak, the clearer it becomes. Obsessive prayer in this world isn't admired. It frightens people. A person unable to stop praying is someone losing control, someone at risk, someone potentially carrying divine messages no one wants to hear. And then comes the quirky tidbit, one that makes your stomach tighten. In certain medieval communities, people believed that prayer performed too frequently or too intensely attracted spiritual attention. Not good attention. The kind that made demons curious. The belief was that the veil between worlds thinned if one prayed too passionately. Such people were said to warm the air for spirits. Historians still argue whether this idea was widespread or mostly clergy-created cautionary tales, but its effects were real. Obsessive prayer was treated with fear. Inside the chapel, the man suddenly stands. You flinch. He lifts his head toward the crucifix. His breathing is ragged, shoulders rising and falling like bellows. He begins speaking louder this time, his words tumbling out in frantic bursts. Forgive me, keep them from me, please, please, please. You step back involuntarily. The villagers around you do the same. The man collapses to his knees again, clutching his chest, gasping out fragments of prayers that spill over one another like a broken chant. The lantern man murmurs, "This is no normal devotion." The older woman wipes her eyes. His mind wanders too close to the unseen. You watch helplessly as they step toward the chapel door, but they stop just shy of entering. They won't touch him, won't intervene. Not yet. To them, a praying man lost in spiritual frenzy isn't someone you interrupt. He's someone you observe from a distance, hoping he doesn't tip further into madness. You finally gather your courage and speak. Shouldn't someone help him? The woman looks at you with weary eyes. Help? Only the priest can touch a man whose prayers burn too hot. You glance toward the priest's house, dark, quiet, no lantern, no sign of life. He sleeps, she adds, reading your thought. We won't wake him unless the man screams. You stand there in the cold silence, unsure which part of that sentence is worse. That obsessive prayer is seen as madness, or that madness is something people wait to escalate before acting. Inside, the man murmurs faster. His voice cracks again. You feel the urge to go to him, to say something comforting. But you know the risk. You'd be seen as drawn to his instability, as influenced by it, as similar. So instead, you step back, and the villagers nod approvingly. You feel the wrongness of this place tightening around your ribs, how people are allowed to break in silence, how suffering must escalate before help arrives, how devotion becomes suspicion the moment it loses rhythm. As you retreat into the shadows, the man's voice continues fierce, frantic, desperate, echoing down the cold stone walls, and you understand now, with painful clarity. In the medieval world, even prayer, the one comfort people cling to in darkness, can become proof of madness if practiced too deeply. You swallow hard, pulling your cloak tighter. Because tonight, every step you take feels like it could become its own omen. You leave the chapel behind, the frantic prayers echoing faintly until the night folds them into silence. For a few blessed breaths, the only sound is your own steady footsteps. But peace never lasts long in this village, not tonight, not under this moon, not with the weight of a dozen tiny madness markers piled on your shoulders. And as the road dips between two tight rows of cottages, you spot another quiet trap waiting for you. A small procession moves slowly toward the chapel you just left. No singing, no torches, just villagers walking with a peculiar stiffness. You step aside to let them pass, but then your eyes catch something. A man walking at the front isn't bowing his head. He isn't signing the cross. He isn't murmuring prayers. He's walking with a blank, calm face stone still, as the others around him whisper the evening rites. And instantly, every pair of eyes in the group flick toward him with quiet suspicion. Because here, ignoring a ritual failing, to perform the expected motions, prayers, or gestures isn't a simple lapse. It's a sign of inner collapse, a sign that something's wrong, a sign of potential madness. You instinctively copy the villager's gesture and touch your fingers lightly to your chest, better to blend in, but the man notices your glance. His face tightens a little, embarrassed, or maybe afraid. A woman behind him taps his arm sharply. "Bow your head," she hisses. He startles, bows awkwardly, then straightens too quickly. A few villagers exchange looks. "He forgets the rites too often," one whispers. "He didn't bow at the harvest blessing either," says another. "Nor during Candlemas," a third mutters. His mind wanders. You walk with them for a few steps, as if caught in their current. But the air feels tense, thick with unspoken judgment. These people are terrified of the invisible, and terrified of those who fail to acknowledge the invisible in the proper ways. A mainstream, historical fact slides into your thoughts. Medieval communities relied heavily on ritual for social cohesion and spiritual protection. Ritual wasn't optional. It was a survival mechanism. Missing a gesture, forgetting a prayer, or refusing to participate marked you as spiritually vulnerable or spiritually dangerous. The Church's writings from the time often warned that those who ignored rites were open to malign influence, a phrase that did not invite nuance. You keep walking, just far enough behind the procession to observe. The man who failed to bow keeps fidgeting, hands wringing, head twitching as if he's remembering too late all the motions he should have done moments ago. People ahead of him whisper with that tight, restrained urgency of those who think they're witnessing something unravel. Then comes the quirky tidbit, one of those deeply medieval ideas that hits you like a splash of cold water. In some regions, people believed that skipping or forgetting a ritual gesture meant your guardian angel had stepped away from you. Not permanently, just briefly, but long enough for demons to slip in, tug at your thoughts, confuse you. Historians still argue whether this belief was widely held or mostly used in sermons to scare inattentive parishioners, but the idea lingered everywhere. A lapse in ritual meant a lapse in protection. The villagers don't say this out loud, but their expressions scream it. As you continue down the lane, the group turns toward the chapel, while you drift off toward a quieter path. But you look back once just long enough to see the man hesitate at the threshold of the chapel, as if afraid to go inside. The others shove him gently forward, their whispers rising like agitated birds. You turn away quickly. You don't want to be pulled into their judgment. But the scene sticks with you, because now, as you walk, you feel yourself becoming hyper-aware of every tiny ritual expectation around you. You pass a carved, wooden cross attached to a house front. The villagers would expect a nod here, or a small gesture, or at least a momentary pause of respect. Do you do it? If you don't, it's suspicious. If you overdo it, it's suspicious. If you do it wrong, it's suspicious. Great. Another lose-lose scenario. You settle for a brief bow of your head, a subtle one, hopefully acceptable. Ahead, you see a few villagers gathered around the small crossroads shrine. They are lighting candles, murmuring evening prayers. A child dips her fingers in the holy water bowl, tapping her forehead lightly. You attempt to pass quietly, hoping no one demands participation. But of course, one does. A middle-aged woman steps forward. "Traveler," she says, "join us." Her tone isn't welcoming. It's watchful. You hesitate. And that hesitation, oh no, earns you 3 suspicious looks immediately. Because only someone who doesn't want to align with the community's spiritual safety would hesitate. So, you step closer, mimicking the motions they perform. Fingertips to brow, a murmur of thanks for the night's protection. You do it carefully, not too quickly, not too slowly. And when you finish, you step back, trying not to look like someone who learned the move 30 seconds ago. The woman scrutinizes you before nodding. Good. Good. You've passed this test barely. You move on. But the night keeps challenging you. Farther up the lane, you see a man sitting outside his house, staring into the fire pit. A few villagers confront him. You didn't join the blessing, one accuses. You didn't bow at the shrine, another adds. You didn't whisper a single prayer, a third says, voice hushed with fear. The man rubs his face tiredly. I forgot, he mutters. Forgot? Someone repeats, horrified. They circle him slowly, not maliciously but fearfully, as if they're watching a rope begin to fray. You keep walking, but you hear snippets. Mind, slipping. Angels turning away. Dangerous to ignore the rites. Priest must be told. You shudder, because tonight you've learned something new about medieval minds. Failing to perform a ritual isn't just a mistake. It's evidence. Evidence that you're drifting from reality. Evidence that something inside you is misaligned. Evidence that you might unravel. And as you continue through the cold dark, you feel the weight of that realization settle into your bones. Every simple gesture, every nod, every whisper, every pause is another thread holding your reputation intact. Break one thread, people notice. Break two, people talk. Break three, people fear. You keep your head down, breath steady, footing careful. Because tonight, you've seen how thin the line is between devout and unhinged in this world, and how easily someone can slip from one into the other. You move away from the crossroads shrine with your cloak pulled tight, trying to shake off the last echo of those judging whispers. But the night has grown heavier now, thick with a kind of quiet that feels expectant, like the village itself is watching to see what you'll do next. Your nerves are frayed, stretched so thin that even your own heartbeat feels loud enough to betray you. But the next danger waiting along the road isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle, soft, almost gentle. It comes in the form of kindness. You're passing a narrow alley when you hear a soft clatter, a basket falling to the ground. A young woman kneels beside it, gathering spilled apples with trembling hands. She looks cold, exhausted, and very alone. You step closer instinctively, crouching beside her without thinking. Here, you say quietly, picking up an apple that's rolled toward you. She startles but manages a small smile. Thank you. I'm clumsy tonight. You help her gather the rest, placing them gently into the basket. It's a simple, act human, warm, instinctive. And for a moment, you feel the tension in your chest loosen. A tiny moment of good. Then you stand, then she stands. Then two villagers at the end of the alley see you. Their eyes widen, their faces tighten, and you feel the danger snap back into place, sharper than before. Because in the medieval world, sudden bursts of kindness are deeply suspicious. You can practically hear the whispered accusations loading like arrows. Why help her? Why now? What provoked such generosity? What are you hiding? A mainstream historical fact presses into your thoughts. Medieval societies valued generosity, yes, but predictable, ritualized generosity. Charity given through the church. Alms distributed at proper times. Hospitality shown in structured, expected ways. But private, spontaneous acts of kindness? Those were often seen as emotional instability. Scholars of the time wrote that excessive mercy was linked to the softening of the mind. Helping too much or too suddenly meant you lacked proper control over your impulses. Madness was often described as a soul overflowing in unbalanced directions. And generosity was one of those directions. In the alley, the two villagers approach slowly, their expressions a little too calm. What's happening here? One asks. The young woman hugs her basket closer. Oh, it's nothing. I just dropped. Did he offer help without asking? The man's voice carries an undertone, sharp as a blade hidden in wool. She didn't need to ask, you reply. I just helped. The villagers exchange a look. There it is again, the woman whispers to her companion. Sudden goodness. You nearly laugh, except laughter would be a horrible idea. Sudden goodness? Really? But yes. In this world, that's how they see it. It's no trouble, you say. Anyone would help. Not anyone, the woman replies, watching you too closely. Not so eagerly. Her tone carries the implication. Only someone whose emotions are unbalanced would act so freely. You take a slow breath, trying to stay calm. She dropped her basket. I picked up an apple. But they're not listening to logic. They're listening to fear. The man leans in slightly. A person given to sudden generosity is not stable. My uncle gave away his cloak to a traveller once, no reason, no thought, and by winter's end he was rambling about angels in his dreams. Wonderful. Medieval correlation strikes again. The young woman with the basket looks between all of you, clearly uncomfortable but too afraid to defend you. She dips her head apologetically and backs away, whispering a soft thank you before hurrying down the lane. The villagers watch her go, then they turn back to you. What made you do it? The woman presses. Your mind scrambles. You consider saying she looked upset, but noticing someone's emotions too quickly is suspicious. You consider saying it was instinct, but instinctive behavior is also suspicious here. You consider saying it was polite. Polite might work. Possibly. Maybe. I was raised to be polite. You answer carefully. The woman squints. Where? You freeze internally, not because you can't answer, but because any answer you give will be evaluated like a confession. If your homeland is too far, they'll suspect you're lying. If it's too near, they'll wonder why they haven't heard of you. If the culture is known for kindness, they'll suspect exaggeration. If it's not known for kindness, they'll suspect contradiction. So you simply say, not far. The villagers stare at you for a long, silent moment. Finally, the man nods. Just be careful. Sudden charity unsettles people around here. You thank them calmly, neutrally, and continue down the lane. Only when you're out of sight do you let yourself exhale. But the night keeps reminding you. Every action has meaning here. Every deviation has weight. You walk a little farther, the crunch of gravel beneath your boots steadying your nerves until you see another villager coming toward you. A hunched old man carrying a bundle of sticks far too heavy for his thin shoulders. He stumbles. The bundle nearly slips, and instantly, instinctively, your muscles tighten with the urge to help. But this time, fear grabs you first. What if someone watches? What if they whisper? What if this is another test? The old man shivers, struggling under the weight. He catches your eye. Would you? He begins, voice cracked and tired. Help me a moment. Your heart aches, but your fear spikes. If you help too quickly, dangerous. If you refuse too quickly, suspicious. If you hesitate too long, also suspicious. You force what you hope is a thoughtful but not overly emotional expression. Then you nod slowly, slow enough to appear cautious but not reluctant. I can help, you say gently. You lift part of the bundle, careful, not to shoulder too much of it lest someone see enthusiasm as instability. Together, you walk a short distance to his doorway. He thanks you softly. Bless you. You smile politely and step back, and that's when you see them, two silhouettes watching from across the lane. Of course someone saw, because tonight, every private kindness becomes a public suspicion. You walk away quickly, feeling heat rise in your chest. Not shame, frustration, because in this world, the very thing that marks your humanity, your empathy, is also one of the things that can mark you as mad. And as the shadows deepen around you, the truth settles like cold dew. Here, kindness is a risk, compassion is a liability, and a gentle heart can be mistaken for a broken mind. You tug your cloak tighter and keep walking, wondering what other invisible traps the night still holds. You continue down the lane, the night settling heavier on your shoulders with every step. You've been tested by silence, staring, walking, tears, laughter, rituals, cleanliness, hunger, and even kindness. Each small action has become a tightrope walk over medieval suspicion. Your nerves feel frayed, stretched with the tension of appearing normal, whatever that means, in a world where normalcy is a cage built from superstition. But now, as you step into a dim courtyard ringed with crooked houses, you stumble into a different kind of danger entirely. A loud one. A sudden shout cracks through the night. Just stop. The voice is sharp, jagged, and raw with emotion. You flinch like the sound itself struck you. A moment later, you hear something slam wood hitting stone. You turn toward the noise and see a man standing outside his home, shoulders tight, face red, hands balled into fists. He isn't attacking anyone. He isn't drunk. He isn't armed. He's just furious, angry, in that deeply human, exhausted way that comes from too many burdens pressed into one soul. But in the medieval world, uncontrolled anger, even brief, even isolated, is one of the quickest paths to being labeled mad. You step closer, instinctively cautious. The man is breathing heavily, muttering curses under his breath, not at the world, not at anyone in particular, just into the tense air around him. As he kicks a stray stone, 3 villagers peek out from different doorways. One whispers, "He's at it again." Another murmurs, "Moon fever." A third mutters, "His humors boil. Keep away." You freeze, because the way they're watching him isn't the way you'd watch someone having a rough night. It's the way you'd watch someone possessed, unpredictable, dangerous. They're afraid of him, but not because he's done anything violent. They're afraid because he lost control briefly. A mainstream historical fact pushes through your mind. Medieval theories of madness often centered around emotional imbalance. Rage, especially sudden rage, was seen as a symptom of excessive yellow bile, a temperament that made people choleric, volatile, and mentally unstable. Doctors, priests, and ordinary villagers alike believed that anger wasn't just an emotion. It was a visible sign of inner disorder that could tip a person toward madness. As if to validate their fears, the angry man shoves a wooden stool aside, sending it clattering. His wife opens the door a crack, eyes wide. "Please," she whispers. "Come inside." He doesn't hear her, or maybe he can't. The anger swallows him. The villagers murmur again. "He loses himself," one says. "Like his father," another adds gravely. "It's starting," a third whispers. You shift your weight, unsure whether to move in closer or keep your distance. But then the man abruptly collapses onto a bench, burying his face in his hands, and just like that, the fire leaves him. He sits there, trembling, whispering apologies to no one in particular. The villagers do not soften. If anything, they stiffen further, because to them, the sudden switch from fury to collapse is even more dangerous. You step carefully into the courtyard, not too close, not too ready, just close enough to show you're not fleeing. "You okay?" you ask softly. He looks up, eyes glassy but not wild. He nods, once ashamed, exhausted, and right on cue, a villager hisses from behind a door. "Don't talk to him." It spreads. Spreads? You almost turn around. Because that phrase, "it spreads," isn't metaphorical. In this world, many people believed anger could be contagious. Not emotionally contagious, spiritually contagious. That when someone exploded with rage, the force of that emotion sent shockwaves through the air that weakened the minds of those nearby. Then comes the quirky tidbit, the one that feels too strange to be real, and yet fits perfectly into everything you've seen tonight. In certain medieval regions, people believed demons traveled on the breath of angry men. When someone shouted in fury, it was said that spirits perched on their shoulders might leap to the nearest listener. Historians still argue whether this belief was widespread or localized, but the fear was genuine. People avoided angry individuals the way modern people avoid hornets. Someone closes a window with a decisive thud. Another barricades their door. A third person drops a wooden beam across their threshold. All because a man lost his temper for 30 seconds. The man's wife finally emerges fully, gently urging him inside. He follows her miserably. The door closes behind them with a soft click. And then silence. A heavy, uncomfortable silence. You're still standing there in the middle of the courtyard alone, visible, vulnerable. The villagers who watched from their windows now turn their eyes to you. Because helping an angry person? Standing near an angry person? Not recoiling in fear from an angry person? Suspicious. One man steps forward. "Best keep your distance from him in the coming days." Another adds, "His mind heats too quickly. People like that aren't safe." A third woman narrows her eyes at you. "You didn't back away when he shouted," she says quietly. She's studying your face, as if trying to detect whether the anger traveled to you, whether some heated spirit now simmers inside you, whether you caught his instability. "I wasn't afraid," you say gently. She tilts her head. "Not afraid," and her voice softens into a whisper of dread. Or, not right in the mind to recognize the danger. Your breath catches. You have no good reply. So you offer a neutral, perfectly bland expression, the medieval equivalent of, "I'm just a boringly normal person, please move along," and continue walking. Slowly. Not hurried. Not rattled. Behind you, the villagers continue to murmur. Not loudly, but enough. Didn't step back. Too calm. Watch him. Watch him. You feel the heat rising in your chest, not anger, but frustration. Yet, you don't let it show. You can't let it show. Because here, even the appearance of anger can mark you. As you walk into the next stretch of road, the truth gnaws at you. In the medieval world, there is no safe emotion. Not joy, not sorrow, not kindness, not hunger, not fear, and definitely not anger. Humans aren't meant to be perfect. But this world demands perfection in every gesture. You adjust your cloak quietly and keep walking, afraid that if your footsteps fall too heavily, someone might think you're stomping. You slip out of the courtyard and into a long, narrow lane that twists like a thread pulled too tight. Your nerves buzz from the lingering tension, every heartbeat reminding you how little room there is for mistakes in this world. You've survived suspicion for silence, for laughter, for tears, for kindness, for rituals, for everything that makes you human. And now the night stretches ahead like a long inhale, a quiet, uneasy inhale, because you suddenly realize how tired your legs feel, how the weight of hours of careful walking is settling into your bones. And as fatigue creeps over you, you make the mistake you've been avoiding all night. You slow down, just a little, just long enough to wander. And in the medieval world, wandering without purpose, letting your steps drift aimlessly, is one of the surest signs that something has slipped in your mind. You pause beneath a crooked signpost to gather your thoughts, unaware that 2 villagers nearby have taken note of your meandering pace. They watch you from a doorway, their eyes tracking the way you look around without a clear destination. One whispers, "See him?" The other murmurs, "No aim in his steps. Dangerous." You stiffen. Here we go again. You force yourself to walk with purpose, but purpose toward what? There's no destination, just the endless maze of night-wrapped lanes. Your steps feel heavier now, drawn not by direction but by exhaustion. And that's exactly the behavior that sparks medieval alarm bells. A mainstream historical fact floats into your thoughts like a lantern in the dark. Wandering, especially at night, was considered a hallmark symptom of several medievally recognized madnesses, including melancholia and mania. Physicians described aimless roaming as a sign that the mind had become unmoored from intention, drifting like a boat cut loose from its dock. Parish records even listed people who walked without cause as potential dangers to themselves and others. You pick up your pace slightly, but your body betrays you. Fatigue drags at your limbs. You drift left, then right, following nothing in particular. And that drifting is exactly what medieval villagers fear most. A person whose body moves without clear reason. Farther down the lane, a man tending a tiny smouldering fire pit looks up at you. His expression tightens. "Traveler," he calls cautiously, "where are you heading?" You freeze mid-step, because if you say, "I'm just walking," it's over. "Home," you say, "eventually." "Eventually?" he repeats, brows raised. "Eventually is for fools or madmen. Which are you?" Your stomach drops. Before you can answer, an older woman leans out her window. "He's been circling the lanes for ages," she says, "like he's looking for something that isn't there." You want to defend yourself, explain yourself, anything, but you know better. Too much explanation looks suspicious. Too little looks evasive. Too emotional looks unstable. Too calm looks uncanny. You choose the middle path. "I'm trying to learn the layout," you say simply. The man grunts. The woman frowns. Their eyes stay locked on you long enough to make your skin itch. Then a voice behind you snaps the tension in half. "What's he doing?" You turn to see a group of villagers carrying baskets of grain. Their lanterns sway as they approach, casting jittery light across the lane. They slow as they see you alone, walking with no bundle, no task, no destination. "He's wandering," one whispers. "Wandering at night," another sighs. "A bad sign," a third mutters. You feel your pulse spike. "I'm not wandering," you say quickly. "Just moving through." "Moving through where?" they ask. Your mind claws for an answer. Any answer. Something solid. But the hesitation is enough. They exchange glances, and you can see it, the snap of judgment settling like frost. "He's drifting." "Ah," woman says softly. "Like my brother did before he lost himself." And here comes the quirky tidbit you wish weren't real. In some medieval villages, people believed aimless walking meant the soul was partially detached from the body, wandering ahead, lagging behind, or drifting sideways. A misaligned soul spelled disaster. People feared that when someone roamed without purpose, the body was vulnerable to possession or the intrusion of wandering spirits. Historians still debate whether this concept of soul slip was local or widespread, but villagers believed it with bone-deep certainty. You try to steady your breathing, but the villagers read your tension as confirmation. His eyes are lost, someone murmurs. His steps are wrong, another adds. He'll need watching, someone concludes. Watching. The medieval solution to everything, not helping, not asking gentle questions, just watching like hawks circling a rabbit. You back up slowly. I'm just tired, you offer. I'll head back. But just tired doesn't always work here. Tonight, it sounds like an excuse. One man steps closer, lantern raised. Show us your footing, he says. You blink. My footing? He nods. Walk straight, to the end of the lane. Your heart sinks. They're testing you. Fine. You walk, heel to toe, controlled, purposeful. Your mind screams the entire time, but your feet obey. You reach the end of the lane, turn, and walk back with equal control. The man watches, the woman watches, all of them watch. Finally, the man lowers his lantern. Better, he says. But if we see you drifting again, we'll send for the priest. Send for the priest, for wandering. You want to collapse under the absurdity of it all. Instead, you nod once and move quickly, this time with visible intent. You pick a direction, any direction, and head there, as though it has always been your goal. Only when the murmurs fade behind you do you allow your shoulders to sag. The road ahead is darker, quieter, colder, but at least no one is watching for the moment. You breathe out slowly, realizing with a sinking ache that there is no freedom in this place. Not of pace, not of direction, not of thought. Because here, even walking requires explanation. And wandering, even for a heartbeat, is enough to make them wonder whether your soul itself has started slipping away. You pull your cloak tighter and continue with careful purpose, because the night has one final judgment left before it's done with you. You press on with deliberate, measured steps, each footfall placed with the careful intent of someone who has learned, painfully, that even walking can betray you. The village thins now, cottages giving way to open fields and dark tree lines that loom like silent witnesses. The night feels colder out here, sharper, as though it's ready to make its final assessment of you before dawn arrives. The moon hangs low, glinting off the frost forming along fences and thatched roofs. Then you see it. Not a person, not a torch, not a priest or a watcher, just a lone figure sitting on a fallen log near the edge of the fields, head bowed, elbows on knees. Their entire posture radiates defeat. They're not crying, they're not praying, they're not muttering or shouting or laughing. They're simply sitting, alone, motionless. The kind of quiet presence most modern people would pass without a second thought. But here, this is the most dangerous sign of all. Because tonight's final truth is simple and devastating. When all the little suspicions add up, every odd stare, every wrong step, every misplaced emotion, the village begins stitching together your reputation as mad. And they stitch it tight. You step closer, noticing that the figure is a young man, someone you passed earlier in the market square, though you didn't pay attention then. Now, in the stillness, he looks hollowed out, almost transparent, in the cold moonlight. As you approach, he lifts his head slightly, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something else, fear, maybe, or resignation. You too? He whispers, voice frayed. You swallow. What do you mean? He gives a small, humorless laugh. They watch you. They whisper. You know it. It's not a question. It's recognition. Because whether the villagers meant to or not, they've also been watching him, and judging him, and adding each tiny behavior into the long, invisible ledger they keep for everyone in this place. A ledger that tilts slowly, relentlessly, toward accusation. You sit down on the log, leaving a respectful distance between you. The man rubs his temples with trembling fingers. I only forgot the harvest prayer once, he murmurs. Once. Then I laughed when my shoe split in the rain. They said that wasn't right. Then I stayed up late 3 nights running. Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. His breath fogs the air. He stares, straight ahead. And now I'm the man who laughs alone. The man who forgets prayers. The man who wanders. The man who doesn't eat enough. The man who stares at things too long. The man whose hands shake sometimes. You feel a chill colder than the night slip under your skin. Because he's right. This is how it begins. This is how it always begins. Pieces, fragments, moments. None of them damning alone, but together. Together they form a picture no villager is willing to unsee. A mainstream historical fact threads its way into your mind with bleak clarity. Medieval communities relied on cumulative judgment, a social mechanism where small behaviors, repeated or witnessed by many, were woven into a narrative of someone's identity. Madness wasn't diagnosed by scholars. It was declared by neighbors. A handful of odd habits could outweigh a lifetime of normalcy. Reputation was a fragile thing, and once it cracked, the damage spread quickly. The young man picks up a small pebble, rolls it between his fingers, then lets it fall. The sound, barely audible, feels like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence the village has already decided for him. Then comes the fringe tidbit that makes your breath hitch. In some regions, once someone was labeled touched, they were believed to emit a kind of aura that influenced others. Not magic fear, suspicion, a self-fulfilling prophecy. People looked harder for their oddities, found them everywhere. Historians still argue whether this belief was superstition or early social psychology. Either way, it ruined lives. The man looks at you again. His eyes search yours with painful honesty. Do they watch you too? You consider lying? Then you don't. Yes, you say quietly. He lets out a shaky breath. They'll decide soon, he murmurs. Who you are, what you are. They'll pull all your moments together like threads, and then he snaps his fingers softly, a sound soft as a heartbeat. You become a story. A story no reasoning can change. A story more powerful than truth. A story that spreads faster than warmth in winter. You sit there, the frost settling on the edge of your cloak, the air humming with the quiet terror of being misjudged, of being misread, of being defined by people who never look beneath the surface. Come, you say gently, rising to your feet. Let's walk, slowly, with purpose. He hesitates, then nods. Together, you step onto the path, not wandering, not drifting, but moving forward with a deliberate steadiness that might, just might, keep watchful eyes at bay. The village is behind you. The fields stretch ahead, and the horizon is beginning to lighten with the earliest hint of dawn. As you walk, you understand the final truth of the medieval mind. Madness here isn't just an illness. It's a reputation, a rumor, a story people tell about you until you believe parts of it yourself. And tonight, you came dangerously, close to becoming that story. You and this young man walk on, one step, one breath, one fragile moment at a time. You don't speak, you don't look back, you just keep moving, because sometimes survival is just persistence dressed as purpose. You slow your pace now, letting the road soften beneath your feet as the night thins into that pale, gentle light just before dawn. The world feels quieter than before, less judgmental, less tight, as though the long watchfulness of the village has finally grown tired. The houses behind you seem far away, not in distance but in influence, their whispers dissolving into the breeze like smoke fading into morning sky. Each step becomes softer, slower, a little less burdened by fear. You breathe deeply, letting the cool air loosen the knots in your chest. The sky above shifts from deep cobalt to a muted blue-grey, stretching like a blanket being pulled slowly over the stars. That first hint of light settles on your skin, warm in a way the torches and candles never could be, and you feel a quiet reassurance hum through you, a sense that the world is bigger than the night that judged you, bigger than the fears, bigger than the stories people choose to tell. The young man beside you walks more steadily now, as if the dawn has soothed something restless inside him too. His shoulders ease, his breath evens. You don't need to say anything. Not every moment needs words. Sometimes the silence between two people is the kind that heals rather than harms. A soft bird call breaks the stillness, the first voice of morning, gentle as an exhale, and with it comes the feeling that maybe, just maybe, today will be kinder. Maybe the world beyond this village carries fewer invisible rules. Maybe the sunlight will give you both a fresh start, untethered from the suspicions that bloom only in darkness. So you keep walking, slow and easy, letting the world brighten around you, and as the horizon warms to gold, you let your thoughts drift toward rest.